installed in your house, there are, depending on your power, there are some limitations that can force it down to different levels for various reasons, especially if you've got older wiring. I had my wiring updated because I had so many of these other problems. I now have a proper feed from the street, a proper big breaker, shiny new box for it all.
Yeah.
That's not always the case.
Yeah. There's a settings inside. The new ones are Wi-Fi programmable. The installer will connect it with their phone and set which current setting is available. You can also parallel up a bunch of them and have several chargers. If you've got several Teslas, you should be so lucky. You can have several of them on one circuit, and you can tell the master that circuit's good for 5 kilowatts, and whichever one plugs in first will get 5 kilowatts, and the others will just trickle charge until that one's full, and then the next one will get a go, and all that balance between them.
And that leads in nicely to the fact that these are also the same chargers that we see referred to as destination chargers. So the one that you put in your home is the same one that you put at a winery, the same that you put at a pub, a restaurant, a shopping centre, hotel. It's the same charger, but they've got a bigger power feed. So, especially anywhere with a big air conditioning system like this, has good 3-phase power coming in. They can give you the full 11 kilowatts because they're drawing a hell of a lot more than that all day long. Put half a dozen of those in a shopping centre, that's barely a dent on their air conditioning costs alone. So it's exactly the same charger, they buy it from the same place, it's installed the same way, it's just got more in the wall behind it. That's still AC charging, that's still limited at 11 kilowatts, it's quite practical. You go to the shops, to the cinemas or whatever, and you're going to put in a quarter, a third, half a tank. It also fits in with the comment from earlier about always be charging. On these, it's good for the battery because it's not too fast. It's convenient because they're just in places. If you're going to a shopping centre, you've got two good options. One has chargers. Go to the one that does. Plug in, leave it trickling away. Same as I choose which pub that I go to in Ipswich based on the one that has the chargers rather than the one that doesn't. They both have good beer and food. Now, a quick note, this is the first time we'll talk about needing an extra cable potentially. Some of these chargers, these destination chargers, aren't quite like the Tesla one that's hardwired in. They will have a plug on the wall. So, you've got the box there with just a hole in it. And they do this sometimes for maintenance and cost reasons, also because of theft and vandalism. So to use some of these destination chargers, you'll need to check. We'll go through some of the apps later how you can check, but some of them don't have that tail on the plug. And you need to bring along your own extension lead.
They're a couple $100, I think.
A couple $100. This is the loaner one, yeah?
No, that's my personal one. That one I got from AliExpress. It's fairly common if you buy a third-party one. You'll get something that looks very similar like that. The one in the picture there is the one you'll get from Tesla. It's a bit longer and a bit more supple and nice. It's $310 from Tesla, shop.tesla.com.
I paid about the same for one locally.
Really good value. These ones are like $280. Well worth spending $30 on the German made.
And that's just good insurance in case.
So if you insurance
because destination charges a lot.
Yeah,
it's good to have.
If you're going on a trip, you don't know what you don't know, so you just have one.
Whereas if you're buying the car always to commute and you don't make those diversions, or you're somewhere where you can always use superchargers if you're leaving home.
Everyone understands that.
Yeah. Outside of that, though, absolutely right. Mine sits in the front of the car all the time, but just in case.
Yeah.
I would, if you only ever go south, probably not a lot of point. There's not a huge amount of them in New South Wales. They exist, but whereas if you go north in Queensland, the Queensland Electric Superhighway, every location has a 50 kilowatt DC charger and 2 outlets for Type 2 that you'll need to bring your own cable for.
So if you're heading up north.
So if you're going further north than Gympie, if you never plan to go further north than Gympie, don't buy one. It's not included with the car because you don't need one.
Yep.
If you do go further north, particularly in Queensland, I would recommend buying one, particularly if you did it more regularly. At each of those locations, there's a bunch and they're only about 150 k's apart, so if one of them's not working, you've got a good chance of just getting to the next one and using it.
That's what you use to Cairns.
But if you, so I've driven to Cairns, I've driven to Cairns once, I've driven to Rockhampton 5 or 6 times, and have still actually never needed it. I've used it in Cairns because there's a tourism network in Cairns. There's about 6 sort of tourist trap sort of places around, and they all have a Type 2 socket. So I've charged as a matter of convenience there, and it's been really good. It just meant that I just hadn't had to stop and DC charge at any point.
Yeah.
I'd go on a roller coaster for a couple of hours and come back to a full car.
Yeah.
Great.
And just to help demystify it some for anyone who's thinking it's high tech, it's really just an extension cord like at home to plug in a lamp. It's just one end's the female, one end's the
You
male.
can't use it as an extension lead. You can't plug 2 of them together though. They physically fit.
That's a good point.
But they don't actually work. If you wanted a 10-metre one, you can't get 2 5s and plug it together. That doesn't actually work.
You can't daisy chain, but as long as you buy one that's, I went with 7.5 metres. I've only once needed the more than 5, but I like it some weird places because why not?
Just the reason these have got these extra pins and why they're not just a normal plug and why it seems more complicated is actually to make it easier. The point with all this Type 2 stuff is you just plug it all in and it just works. Whereas a normal power point, if you several cars plugged in at once, it could trip a breaker and things like that. Those extra pins let all of this equipment talk to each other. The car talks to the charger, which can talk to the power grid and know what the capabilities of all that are and make sure that we're only charging up to the rate of the smallest link in that chain. You can buy those cables in lower current capacities as well. I highly recommend you just bought a 3-phase 32 amp one like the Tesla one. But there are ones that are lower capacity, there are ones that have only got a single phase wired and all that. And none of that will do anything other than make the car charge slower. It's all engineered to be absolutely idiot-proof.
Nothing will
Plug in
break,
whatever you want,
nothing will catch on
and
fire.
stuff will just work.
It really doesn't matter what Type 2 you buy.
It'll work. It
It
just
doesn't
if
matter.
you buy the fancy one, it'll be a bit faster in
Yeah.
certain situations.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
so-
taking the idiot-proof,
Yeah. Those extra data pins just mean that all this stuff talks to each other and negotiate a safe solution for the entire system.
And it's all, you have no input on that whatsoever. It just happens. You
Plug it in.
you plug in, the power comes out. If it's less than you hoped for, then it's because of a reason. But nothing's going to catch on fire because of it.
You wonder why they just don't make it 32 amps as a standard, because the people that don't understand, they plug it in and it's single phase or it's rated
So-
less than that, then they're not going to get the capabilities.
The reason they sell a single phase cable is because there are single phase cars. So Model 3's got the 3-phase charger built in. There are several other cars that only got single phase chargers, so there's no point in wasting the extra copper on a 3-phase cable when the car can't use it. So
Sales.
there are reasons, but they're not particularly good reasons, and certainly 90%, not possibly even 100% of the cars you can buy new today are all 3-phase in Australia.
So Ionic, the original Ionic is 6.6.
That's
and
just been discontinued, I
discontinued.
think.
We can still get some, but
So,
discontinued.
yeah.
Yeah, but there's we're starting to go up the Kano model where things are getting more capable.
Yeah.
And
And more consistent.
well, consistent.
Yeah, everyone's there were some early Model S and some Renaults and things that had 22 kilowatt charging. So,
Really fast.
but most manufacturers all seem to have settled on the 11 3-phase, 7 kilowatt single phase charger capability in the car as a good middle ground.
And for anyone that tuned out, the important takeaway from all of that was you plug it in and it just works. And whatever rate it says on the screen, that's what you're getting. It'll give you an estimate, and that's good enough. And that's the beauty of this system is.
I understand with the 2-to-2, you've got to put the smaller cable in to the source.
Yes, they won't fit the wrong way around.
Oh, they won't. Okay.
Just like the PowerPoint at home, you can't put the 2 pins, just don't plug in.
The opposite.
One pro tip from my experience in using those Queensland.
Oh, of course, yes. I didn't even notice the difference.
Yeah,
Yes, no,
it's quite physically.
Yeah.
These the Schneider pillars that they have at the Tesla, at the Queensland Superhighway ones, they've got a rubber gasket around this that can make them really hard to put in. You've got to properly put your back into it to get them to seat properly.
It's a bit like trying to push it through a rubber glove. Like it actually
Yeah.
feels like a
Yeah.
stretchy rubber
They're
gasket.
the ones the government's putting in.
Yeah,
Yes.
so there's one of those every 150 kilometres all the way from Coolangatta to Port Douglas,
Okay.
past Cairns.
Yeah.
And electrically speaking,
and they're
actually
building
pretty
another
good.
Yeah.
30 or something out west, like all the way out to Longreach, Cunnamulla, over the
And how
next
quick do
12
they
months.
charge on the highways, like roughly kilometres per hour?
40-ish.
40.
On 11 kilowatts,
That's good
about
for
40
top-ups.
kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
Oh,
for top-ups or
absolutely. If
good
you're
for-
stopping for a long lunch, if you're enjoying your tourism,
So an hour's gonna get you another 50 k's.
yeah, 3 hours is going to get you to the next. If one of the chargers is broken, the reason you would take one of those with you is that if you get to one of those chargers and the one you're at is broken, you can still plug in, and in 3 hours' time, you've got enough juice to get to the next DC one.
Yeah.
So,
I see.
And
Yeah.
so I guess
So
the
stopping at those slow ones all the way up to Cairns wouldn't be enough.
well, so each of those locations has a 50 kilowatt DC charger, which is very fast, and it's a long lunch, 40 minutes from
Yep.
almost empty to almost full.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
not
so they've got
50 not
both.
50 kilometres
And the reason
per
you're
hour.
taking that with
No,
you is
so-
that it's only a single,
That's not that
single
cable.
DC charger.
Yeah.
That if it's in use, you can still get something while you wait for the other guy to finish off the AC cable.
Right.
It's just a backup. Or if that, and those DC chargers do fail and they are in the middle of nowhere and it can take a week or two for someone to come out and fix it. There have been some that have been down for months because of supply chain problems, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
so you're using
Having one of
those.
those gets you there just slower.
How quick do those government charge again?
It depends on the charger.
50.
Most of them are
50.
50. The new ones are going to be 75,
Yep.
and you will find other networks that look exactly the same but might have faster chargers inside the box.
50
So-
to 75 kilometres per hour of charge.
Kilowatts,
Kilowatts. So I don't know what that translates to. 'cause
150, 200-ish, something.
That's what I'm trying to
kilometers
work
an hour.
out.
Yeah,
How
it's
many
200 or 300
kilometres?
kilometers an hour.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
200 or 300 kilometres
Yeah.
per hour. So charging for an hour on one of those, you might go up to 250 or 300 kilometres.
Yeah, so when I've been like driving to Cairns or whatever, I'll stop at one of those, and if I pull in at 10%, I'll go to the pub across the road.
Yeah, exactly right.
I'll get a palmy.
Yeah.
I'll come back to a full car.
Yeah, awesome.
No worries at all.
So speaking of fast chargers, because that was the next anyway, is we'll put up a photo of the Tesla superchargers. That's just another example of the fact that the DC fast chargers are a big box rather than a little charger in the car. The reason why I put up these specifically, just so you know, for Tesla superchargers, they're installed in pairs.
Yeah.
Here anyway, and you'll get an A and a B, so it'll be 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. Each of those numbers share a power feed. So if there's someone in 1A and nothing else in use, plug into one of the twos. Otherwise, you're splitting the same power feed and charging at half rate. If there's no other parks left, it's there to be used. It's fine. Don't worry about other people.
It will prioritise the guy. So each of the bays will do 125 kilowatts, and the charger behind them does about 150. So you'll get 20 or 30 if you're the second guy to pull into that bay. And then when he's finished, or as his rate drops down, we'll see a curve later that sort of explains this, but as their rate goes down, yours will come up. So it won't make a huge difference to your day. But if you pull in, there's one car there, don't go in the bay right next to them. Just spread out on every second one.
And yeah, again, if you rock up and every second one's already taken, it's fine. Plug it and charge. It's there to be used. And just to reiterate on Luke's point from before, you'll see the ones here, rather than one cable, they'll have two inside
A
there.
bit further. This is obviously a mixture. This has obviously been expanded because there's
Oh, yeah.
singles there and there's doubles on the
Yeah.
further back.
Oh, good.
So these ones have got two cables in them. You
That's
want to
the
use
one
you want to use a larger one for a Model 3.
So that combined charging system with the two big pins down the bottom, that's ours. The other one is what Tesla did back in the day before the world decided something different would be the standard.
That big shed at the back is actually where the chargers are. So supercharger, the pillar of a Tesla supercharger really doesn't have too much stuff in it. It's a connector and some fans and stuff. All the interesting stuff happens in that shed up the back that converts the AC to DC.
Now, this is an aside, as of that Queensland and the other states are expanding all the networks. It's fantastic. But has Tesla had any obligation, of course there's more and more Tesla coming on the road, everybody knows it, to expand their network?
Absolutely. So if you go to Find Us, there's a website.
Yeah, 2 or 3 in the third quarter, first
Yeah,
quarter.
yeah,
next
and there's
year.
certainly some of that's been interrupted with floods and
I
drama
understand,
and
but
stuff like
outside
that.
the cities, nothing. Past Kempy, further north,
So
nothing.
you'll look at that map, and there's locations for next year or later this year and next year in Maryborough and Rockhampton.
Superchargers or just
Superchargers.
50
No,
destination chargers?
no, super.
Okay.
So 250 kilowatt DC chargers. Yeah.
And one or two stall, or
They've got a few twos. Like, so I've used probably almost every supercharger in Australia, other than Western Australia. There's a couple of 2 bays around, but most of them are 4 or more. There are 4, 6, 8 is more common. So compared to Queensland government location with only 1, and most other third parties that have 1 or 2, much more reliable, much more availability in school holidays. If you want to get somewhere quickly, just use the nav in the car and use superchargers.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was shaking his head now, so there's no obligation on Tesla.
Only a moral one, not an actual
Yeah,
standing
that's
obligation.
right, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is something that they will do because it's great for their marketing department as well.
There's no rule.
But there's no rule
No,
requiring.
yeah.
So yeah, you can see where
But
they're
they will.
marketing.
They will.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of money to be made for them as well. Fast chargers will replace servos, and there's a nice markup on that power, and rightly so, because it's $100,000 for one of those chargers. Plus installation.
Just looking at the find us now, Bundaberg and Rockhampton are opening Q3 2022.
Oh, perfect. I have a trip planned to Townsville. So these are the ones.
Yeah,
that
so
you
this
might
is the
want to see
Queensland
here.
Electric Superhighway location. This is Mount Larkin. It's my car and Katrina's car there.
Also recycled from before. Please. For familiarity.
So you see that you can't see the AC outlet, but that's a 50 kilowatt DC charger there. And just behind my car, there are a little white box that has a socket on each side to plug in an AC charger. So in this location, we turned up and we're using both. So as we drove, we were sort of alternating. We were travelling with our kids, so there was 6 of us in 5-seat cars. So we needed to take 2 cars. So we just go to each location, and one of us would DC charge. Whoever was lower would DC charge, and whoever was higher would AC charge at the same time at the same location, and get on our way. And that worked great. You know, no one's waiting for anything.
So using their
kids are
cable
out
is
and-
quicker than using your own.
Sorry?
Using your own cable, your backup, that's slower.
Well, you still. Oh yeah. So
Because
I'm
it doesn't
charging
have
at
the
11
DC,
kilowatts
yeah.
while Katrina's charging at 50.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you're charging at 50 speed, but still a useful worth amount of energy for the 40 minutes that she's going from 0 to full. I'm still going from 15 to 40. So you know, it's
And are
still,
these
still worth
government
it.
ones you need to set up an app to be charged?
Yeah,
Instead of
ChargeFox.
ours? Yeah. That's
This is,
ChargeFox.
if I had one major criticism of this network, is that the thing you need to make it work is the ChargeFox app, and the ChargeFox app gets a mention on a sticker about this big on the back of that sign. It's not on there's a ChargeFox logo about that bit, their postage stamp size on the top of that charger, and no other indication about how you're meant to use them.
So
That
that's
is absolutely garbage, and I've bleated and whinged, and certainly something that TOCA are doing is making signage better at these locations.
Step 1.
They're full
And
of
there's
you know
step 2.
self-aggrandising promotions about Eureka and the Queensland government and how they're helping out EV drivers. But how do we use it?
so
It's
that,
so fundamental.
so I have this here in
Yeah.
big print because the way to tell a ChargeFox charger is to look for a tiny one of these somewhere on the charger. That's the most reliable method, and it's often like that little thing there. That
And who am I
Yeah.
paying for that? Who's the money going to for that?
ChargeFox.
Yeah, so
they
they're
are
building.
they are running it
that's the app.
financially and administratively,
Okay.
Yeah.
and so you'll have the ChargeFox app to use the government
They've done a
chargers.
deal with the government.
Correct.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
because they've already got infrastructure to support that.
Yeah.
So is it a different financial charge rate, bigger one and smaller one?
No, actually, they're the same kilowatt hour rate.
Okay. A bit,
Bit dubious,
iffy.
but
As-
yeah, they
as
are.
more-
They're both 30 cents a kilowatt hour from memory. It's
It's just
slowly
gone up to
creeping
30.
up over time.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
there are more networks competing, you'll find that'll sort of level out to a new normal between the fast rate and the slower one.
Surely go up in July when the electricity rate is.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and
Cost rate and charge rate, cost out rate or price rate are completely separate from each other, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. In this case, you pay what you pay and get on with it, really. It's all over the place.
And it's like with petrol. You pay whatever they tell you you're going to pay is what you pay because you need to get somewhere.
Yep.
But yeah, so the other point I've got written down to note on my piece of paper is if you're somewhere that has poor reception, you don't really have the app or whatever the case is, you can from ChargeFox log in and request a free RFID card. You don't need to use your phone, you can just rock up, tap the card here, in the glove box of the Model 3 is a little slot for you to put cards in. Get a ChargeFox card, get an EV card, EVIE.
There are several different. ChargeFox is just one billing company that these chargers use.
They're the two that are really common at the moment. When you start finding new ones, if you need to use them more, hopefully they'll do the same. Get a card, put a few of them in the car there, so if you're ever stuck with a phone drama, then you can just tap, charge, and move on. It doesn't cost anything. Like, I got both of them and they were literally free. You just put in your address and it magically appears 4 days later. Can't recommend it enough because it has got me out of trouble when my phone stopped working and I had to use my Tesla RFID card to get into the car and I had to use my ChargeFox card to get home.
IKEA's got terrible reception at Logan. For example, trying to use your phone to activate the ChargeFox charger under the IKEA is very hit and miss.
Another perfect example then.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the plug-in the glove box, but surely with the ChargeFox card, physical card, that's all you need.
No, I'm not talking about a plug. There's literally a slot where you can sit RFID card or where you can
Storage
sit.
spot for the car.
There's a
little
Yeah, it's just a little.
Yeah, nothing to do with the plug-in.
No.
Nothing technical. There's just an
You don't need to keep
organizer.
it in your wallet. You can just leave it in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I should have called it an organizer.
Yeah.
Now here's that last bit of technical note around those fast chargers. Been asking before about the rate the batteries can charge at. This is what a charging graph looks like. A battery's like a sponge. When it is empty, you can charge it, or like a sponge, you can put water in very quickly. When it is nearly full, it's very hard to jam those last little bits in. So around the 20% mark, it just sucks up as much electricity as you can jam in for most of these batteries. And it tapers off quite gradually. And as you get up towards, again, we're back to this magic 80% number. Even on LFP, the reason you don't charge above 80% on a fast charger is not because of anything to do with the battery as far as longevity, cost, or any of that. That's because it's really slow. It's a waste of time. It's actually quicker for you to make a long trip by stopping twice and charging in this really fast spot than it is to stop once and wait for it to get all the way up to full. So stopping every sort of 200 to 300 kilometers for a quick 10-minute top up will see you with less total standing around waiting time than if you stop at one big stop in the middle and have to wait for an hour and a half. So because they charge so quickly when they're near empty, you plan on purpose to rock up to every fast charger with somewhere between sort of 20 to 50 in the lower half. Don't rock up to one at 60%, try to get to 100, it'll take you forever. Does that make sense? Roughly, will be more talk
If you
on.
use any of the apps, so we talk about trips soon. We'll have a break in a second, and we'll talk about trips. But all the apps will optimize for time, and you'll see when you look at the trip, it'll be telling you to stop for 8 minutes and charge from 15 to 25% and go again, because it's just optimizing the amount of time you spend on the road.
Yeah, so that's
Keeping it
the
low
technical.
and short stops.
So that's the technical side behind it. Don't need to remember exactly what that graph looks like, but when it comes into trip planning and you think, why am I stopping so far before the full range of my battery? This is what's underlying all of that.
Yeah.
It ties in nicely with the every 2 hour break.
Yeah,
Actually.
absolutely.
Yes, and the other way that I put that to people is that my car has more range than my bladder.
When you have 2 kids in the car, way more range.
It's what, like 20
Way
kilometers?
Yeah.
So I've had those questions. So we'll skip on to the last little bit of equipment. So this is just for people who do want to go on those longer trips. You've got your UMC. We've had a good discussion around the Type 2 to Type 2 cable. But if you're going, especially if you're going west and you want to really get off the beaten track, then one of your best sources of charging that are no destination chargers is going to be this bad boy. This is a big 3-phase connector. There are 2 different ones, 20 amp and 32 amp you'll commonly see. There's some other variations as well. If you want to go more into the detail of that, there's people who've done some of these long trips. It's probably a bit too much of a niche thing force upon everyone, but if you do plan to do that, come up and have a chat with one of us. There's lots of good stuff that you can get. Point is, these sorts of plugs are on the sides of some factories, pubs, so on, showgrounds. Sometimes in the middle of nowhere, you'll have a big showground with a big light pole on one of those on the side, and the council is okay with you plugging in. That's a full battery on performance overnight. So it's a great way to charge up a car. You just have to plan in advance, call ahead, see if they've got one they don't mind you using.
Yeah. Sometimes
If
it's going somewhere to pick up a key, and it's more of a palaver, but
So it's not for
you haven't got
everyone,
a choice.
but if you want to,
Yeah.
come up, we'll have a chat, and
That's a Birdsville races trip.
it's spot on.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can,
What
it is,
do they work?
depends.
Join the club.
It-
Join the club and free.
So it depends
So
on,
we have a big bucket full of them that we keep in every capital city. We'll ship them out to you if you're not in a capital city, and it comes with all the advice you need on using it as well. So we'll be able to work with you to plan your trip out, tell you what cables you need to take with you, deliver them to you, or tell you where to pick them up.
Did you prefer email or phone?
There's a form on the website.
All right.
Yep. And the slide, one of the other slides has a link to the form in it.
so if you've got like Birdsville on the bucket list, don't buy them. If it's a one-off trip,
Do not buy any of this stuff. Like,
unless you are a dedicated, I'm going to travel around Australia for 3 years and blog the whole thing, then maybe buy them.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
We limit our hiring to 2 months, I think.
Yeah, right.
Which is
Oh, that's great.
typical
Thanks
for
a lot.
most people that do a lap of Australia.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
But if you're going to take a lazy lap of Australia, talk to us. We might be able to sort something out. But
But to buy
Yeah.
one, that's what I want to know, because we go to a farm, that's all, and that gives
yeah,
me
I mean, if you go to a farm and you're there, you've been visiting relatives and staying 2 nights or something, right?
Yeah.
Just plug it into a power point. You're good. That's all you
A
need.
couple of $100, $300 is about what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
But
Yeah,
it's
sorry.
that ballpark.
So yes.
$300 ish.
And
plus
Couple
minus.
hundred bucks.
if you're going to be using,
Talk to Aaron. If you're going to
Sort you out.
He's got them in stock. So a couple $100, but generally, and I drive to Rockhampton and stay with my parents. PowerPoint in the garage. I'm there for a week or somewhere between 2 days and a week.
Remote farm, you can't get to the power in the house, it's all
Right.
generating power in sheds and things.
Yeah.
and that being the case, then it's definitely worth getting a better quality one, because you will find cheaper ones and they don't have the durability. Some of them don't even have really good connections. If you're using it a lot, having one that actually holds up to constantly being folded and unfolded is really worthwhile. I think.
Are they on plug share, all the 3-phase sockets and
Yeah,
stuff?
they're turned off by default.
Oh, okay.
So there's filters in plug share, and we'll talk about in the very last section today. We'll talk about resources. One of the things we'll touch on will be using plug share, and I'll just go through that on screen. It'll let you filter out. So by default, it won't show you 3-phase power points. It won't show you limited use charges like these that are behind a security gate and stuff like that. They won't show up on screen by default, but you can dig in and turn them on. If you're doing something special.
And any more of the charging details probably going to be more like case specific for people. If you want any more detail, come and ask. We love chatting about this stuff.
Is it a silly idea to have a separate app for sockets? Like instead of going just a plug share, like having 3-phase sockets all just littered around the place that were hidden from,
Yeah, there's some moral
Because some of them are-
complexities in that.
some of them aren't supposed to be
those power points
used.
aren't there for you to leech power off.
But there are a lot of exposed sockets around that people just assume no one's going to plug into. They're not there for public use, but they just haven't thought to put a padlock on. It's probably not a good idea to have an app for all of those.
Having run events like this where we've needed power and things like that in fields, most of the council ones in parks and stuff are turned off at the breaker in a lock circuit board and stuff like that. So I wouldn't.
And the ones in
around
plug
that.
share have usually been put in by that council to say, we're willing to do this, here's the instructions, email this guy, we'll give you a key.
Yeah.
So now on to covering a topic already mentioned, car makes noise. It won't always coincide with when the car is on and being used. So cooling fan's the most common one. You will have sometimes after the car has charged, sometime later, and it's still making noise. That's fine. Sometimes it takes forever to cool down the battery. Sometimes it heats up the battery to make the charging quicker, then has to cool it back down again. As long as it doesn't sound like it's like there's nothing really loud and clanking and exploding, and there's no fire coming out or whatever. The car does make some funny noises because it can turn on all of its control systems independently of the engine. And so if it needs to, it just does. It doesn't ask permission. Another really small one on charging is there's a big contactor in the battery. It's like a switch, except big enough to handle all of the power of the car. So when you turn the car on after it's been asleep, you might hear a big clunk. If you hear that regularly, do not panic. It is just the big switch inside the battery that connects it to the rest of the car. It makes the loud clunk because it has to be really bloody big to pass through all that power. Again, totally fine. We've been a little bit through grumpy charges. If that doesn't work, unplug, wait for it, try again as your first instance.
Yeah, just if you're at a location and you're having trouble getting the charger to work, read through the details on plug share. There'll be someone there who'll say, and they'll say, press the red button, wait 30 seconds, twist it to the left, try again.
Stand on your left leg.
Yeah, so try that stuff. The one at Gympie's renowned for, is renowned for being, Warwick.
Yeah.
The one at Warwick's renowned for needing rebooting multiple times to get it to work. I think it's actually down for repair entirely now. So.
And a lot of the small chargers, especially the Tesla ones, have a reset button on the side. If it's being grumpy, you hold it down, you reboot it just like your phone, and it boots up, and it's most cases fine.
Silly question, but how long do you hold the button down?
Until the lights do
written on
something.
It's actually, it says like reset, hold down for 3 seconds or something, sort of written around the button on the ones I've seen.
Yeah, if you're ever in doubt, the not quite foolproof but almost is wait until the lights do something different. Either they turn off or they go red or they start blinking. It's, you've caused something then. Check payment method. If it's one of the ones that you're supposed to scan in on and you've opened the app and you put your phone up, if your phone doesn't do anything and it's not charging, you've rebooted it, all that stuff, and you're still not confident, try the RFID card. It might just be that the app's playing up. So payment will stop you from charging on some of them. The emergency stop button. Some of the big chargers have a big emergency stop button. Occasionally someone presses that instead of the non-emergency stop button. It doesn't reset itself. That's that comment before about push or pull or twist. It'll say on it how to reset it. Not super common except for the ones that are a bit out of the way, but that's not everything. There's lots of ways they can go wrong. These are ones I mention only for your convenience. If they don't work, try calling the support number on the charger.
Yeah.
Most of them have a decent support. They can do things remotely, and if it's beyond that, then you're not electrical engineers. Best effort. If you give up, move on to the next one. And just a quick bit on charging etiquette, which was asked before as well. First of all, always be charging. Wherever you've got an AC charger, plug in, keep topping up. Avoid that accidental I'm out of battery. Don't block charges. So what that means, the other side of always be charging. If you're parked in a charging spot, be charging. If you're not charging, you shouldn't be in a charging spot. It's just like going to a servo. Parking next to the fuel bowser, filling up, and then going to watch a movie without moving the car. It's the source of go for the car. Don't block it if you're not using it. So that means check the app, move the car when it's done, or the other way of approaching it is to be contactable. And this is where someone asked before around if you don't know when someone's going to be done, what we really want is this education of have one of the commonly used tools to be contactable. So if you're at 90% and you want to hit 100, but someone's like just desperate to get on that charger, then you've got options like the plug share app we keep mentioning. There'll be a show and tell on that later for how to use it, but one of its features is the ability to contact someone who's checked in at a charger. There's a website called needtocharge.com. You just put in the number plate of the car that's there. If they've registered, they get a polite message saying, hey, are you free? Like, you might not be full, but can you move early? I'm in a pinch.
So we should all register with needtocharge.com.
plug shared and need to charge are both options.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, like broadly, no. I mean, it shouldn't be necessary. There are options out there, right? Like to particularly, I think if you're a regular user of a particular charger, I think it's probably a good idea that if you could.
I literally
You
sometimes
want
leave a note on
to
my
be
windscreen.
polite and stupid, right?
I typed a note.
And that's my
Hey,
method.
if you need a charger,
So I've
text
got,
me
I've
on.
got a sticker under my charge flap. I just got my label maker and made a label, and I've got a little sticker under the charge flap that you can only see when it's open. That says, "If you need me to unplug, call my mobile
Oh, that's a
number."
good idea. Underneath.
Straightforward.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple of phone calls, and like I've been at the restaurant across the road, and I've just come out and moved my car one car space over to let someone else in.
That's
And,
good.
and that's the low tech method. And that's what
Yeah,
I do.
that's-
I've got
that's
it's,
really
it's
good
a hand
advice.
scribbled note, it's in pencil, it's on a torn piece of paper, but it sits on top of my dash if I'm going to be at a charger, especially if I'm going to be gone for 4 hours, but it might only take 3 to charge.
Yeah.
So whatever method
Especially in a
you're going
motel
to
in a
use.
country town, because it's overnight, and
Yeah.
someone might be driving from out of town. Like I had to charge at like 10 p.m. I'm not going to wake up at 2 a.m. and move it.
No.
Like I'm
So-
at a motel in Toronto,
Unless
like, no,
someone's
that's what they might.
If someone's desperate enough to call you at 2 a.m, they're probably really in a pinch.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yes, that's when I
you're
want
fine.
to leave the number.
So
Yeah.
it is a grey area. There is no black and white here, right? And you talk about whether it's being like parked at a petrol bowser, being a DC charger, like a supercharger. You know, they work like a bowser. You're only there for a short period of time. You get in, you charge, you get out. Right through, and right at the other spectrum of that is your own charger at home, where you just leave it plugged in all the time. And somewhere along that grey area is a charger at a hotel, a power point at a caravan park. Is sort of along a grey spectrum between plug it in and forget about it and never move your car, as you do at home, through to as soon as it's finished charging, you need to move. Not least of which because Tesla will start charging you money if you don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, idle fees.
there's a grey area along that spectrum. Don't get upset at people who have forgotten, who are watching a movie, who plug in a shopping centre. Those chargers at the shopping centre are installed as an enticement to get you to shop there rather than someone else. They are there, they're destination chargers. They're not rapid chargers. They're for convenience. They're, rushing back to your car as soon as it's finished isn't and shouldn't be necessary. Opinions vary, I understand. But I think getting upset at people that have left their car plugged in for an hour or two after it's finished filling in a shopping centre is probably a bit harsh.
Especially considering if they're there for a 5 or 6 hour charge because they're
Sprinting out of your dinner or sprinting out of a movie to come move your car.
and so hard to estimate as well. So it's and that's why it's called charging etiquette rather than charging rules. It's a moral obligation or a legal one. In most cases, fast chargers, there's you're parking there not charging, you can be fined. But
There's and on that spectrum, there's a difference between, say, an AC outlet at a destination charger at a shopping centre in the middle of Brisbane compared to an AC outlet in Cunnamulla, right? Where it's the only one in town, and that's where everyone's, if they're there and need to charge, they're all sharing the same one in a 100-kilometre radius. Whereas if there's a supercharger 3 blocks away, I'm staying on that charger as long as I like. I'm not getting out of my movie to come move it, because if you really need a charge, you'd go to the supercharger.
Yeah.
So you're not really inconveniencing anyone.
And so think of it as Luke said as well from both sides is be considerate to others, consider the fact that some people might have had 2 failed charges and they need that last top up to get home. But on the other hand, consider that it's a big busy shopping centre, there's superchargers within 5 minutes in all directions. Don't get grumpy at someone. And it's just putting yourself on the other side is sometimes you are not desperate for charge, sometimes you are. Think of both sides of that and you'll probably come up with a pretty reasonable answer for how you're going to use the charger. And now that's it for me anyway. So we went through the technical stuff. It's the driest bit of the day. It's the stuff that you weren't necessarily excited to learn, but that power versus capacity, kilowatts versus kilowatt hours. If you are fastidious with that, you will understand that simple maths of how long might it take me to charge there, or do I really get any benefit from using a faster charger if I'm there for 6 hours? That's the extent of the technical knowledge you really need to make good use of these cards. Everything else is done for you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask about all this charging stuff is, I know there are people who are constantly charging superchargers, like Nathan Merritt, who's in the Uber driver. He would wear his battery pack down faster than if you only occasionally use a supercharger. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, so for anyone who missed
A little
it,
bit.
the comment
Some
is
might
that
not see it.
if you are charging exclusively off DC fast chargers like superchargers versus AC, that you will in fact wear your battery out a bit faster because you are smashing that power in so fast. Yes, that is a consideration, but also if you're doing that, it costs more to charge on a supercharger than it does an AC. So the people that are doing that are probably doing it because it is their only option, and they just have to accept the degradation.
They're making money doing it, so they spend more money on batteries.
The example I always use for that one is Nigel, who lives in Byron Bay and uses his Model S and other vehicles as a chauffeur transfer, basically from here to Brisbane, from there to Brisbane. 460,000 Ks on one of his Model S's. Superchargers almost exclusively, fast chargers almost exclusively. Changes brakes at the 460,000 Ks, so that's the brake conversation. But then further to that, has had his battery degrade by about 9% in 460,000 Ks. And that pretty much usually just
It is absolutely real. It absolutely happens, and it's not a big deal.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is it 9?
Like, you can do everything wrong and it's still not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah, correct. That's probably a really great takeaway.
Might
It's
degrade.
like you don't ask any of these questions when you buy a petrol car.
Nah, and your fuel economy goes down as your engine gets
It's
tight.
electric, it's like, oh!
It's
Like, it's good to
certainly
learn, but it's like, you don't
nowhere
want
near
to
as
freak
bad.
out. Yeah.
Correct.
It's nowhere near as bad for an EV as not changing the oil in a nice car is.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
right.
I didn't know how my last car worked out.
Yeah. All right. We'll any more questions? But we'll take a break. So we'll come back at 11:10. So stand up and wander around for a bit, and
So, right. Any
coffee or
specific questions?
Yeah.
Happy to answer.